It's Tuesday, February 17th, 2009, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville. Produced and distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C., this is your NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about our show at our website, stash.norml.org, and continue the education and conversation on our blog as well. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. The podcasting and blogging technology for the NORML Daily Audio Stash is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. For your professional web design needs, visit redaphid.com. Good day, Stashers, and welcome to the podcast. Couple of quick notes before we get started with the show. Want to let you know about a very serious bill in Kentucky, Senate Bill 5. This is a bill that would institute per se DUID laws, which basically means that if you have any detectable metabolite of marijuana in your blood, it's just the same as getting a DUI. Check out our activist alerts, which you can find on the right side of the stash, and click on the map so you can figure out how you can oppose this zero-tolerance drug driving bill, SB 5, in the state of Kentucky. Also want to let you know we are preparing the stash for advertising. You may have seen some of the banner advertisements appearing within the posts and some of the square advertisements along the sidebars. We're going to be opening these up in the month of March to outside advertisers for the first time ever on a norml.org website. So if you're interested in getting 3,000 views a day up to 21,000 views every week for your advertisement placed to a very select and dedicated niche of cannabis-friendly consumers, send me an email at stash@norml.org with the subject line advertising request, and we'll get a rate sheet out to you, and you can make the decision if you'd like to help support and advertise on the NORML Daily Audio Stash. I also get a lot of emails from stashers at stash@norml.org, and one stasher wrote to me asking how he could respond when someone who knows you're a stoner makes some sort of smart-ass comment that denigrates your use of cannabis. You know, for example, if I were going somewhere and someone said, "Hey Russ, what are you going to do this weekend? Smoke a lot of pot and get high?" Well, here's one snappy answer to that stupid pot question that I might throw down. No, actually, I was going to write a paper this weekend on how the last 5 presidential elections have been won by a former pot smoker, and how in 2 of the last 3 elections, both major party candidates were former pot smokers, and how currently the largest state in America and the largest city in America are run by former pot smokers. All right, coming up in today's stash, we've got your hemp headlines. We're going to be taking a look at the state of California and some interesting comments from right-wing radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh. We're also going to be taking a look at Mexico and Ohio, plus some new cannabis science that we'll be discussing tomorrow with Dr. Earlywine regarding the use of cannabis and your chance of getting into a serious injury. It is Government at Work Day on Tuesdays, and we've got 2 interviews featuring Government at Work activists. Chris De La Forest, a former Republican representative in the state of Minnesota, is here to talk about medical marijuana in that state and Senate File 97. We're also going to be speaking with Tom Dobert from Montana Patients and Families United at mtpfu.org on the status of a few bills up there in Montana regarding marijuana law reform. Also, our daily Toker Tunes brought to you by MarijuanaMusicAwards.com. Today, of course, is Variety Tuesday, and we'll be hearing from Herbal Nation. We've been manicuring these buds of truth all day, so let's grind one up. It's time for your NORML Daily Audio Stash.
Hello, I'm Paul Stanford from the Hemp and Cannabis Foundation, or THCF. Medical marijuana is legal in 13 states today, and THCF has clinics in 8 of those states. Our doctors help qualified patients obtain an authorization for medical marijuana in their state. Patients are eligible for medical marijuana with a history of either severe chronic pain and or nausea, cancer, AIDS or HIV, hepatitis, glaucoma, seizure disorders like epilepsy, chronic muscle spasms such as in multiple sclerosis or asthma, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, and gastrointestinal disorders like IBS or Crohn's disease. If you or someone you know has one of these conditions, our doctors will help you obtain a permit for medical marijuana. THCF Medical Clinics has offices in Washington State, Oregon, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Montana, and now Michigan. Call 1-800-723-0188 or go to the web at hemp.org or 1-800-723-0188.
Now it's time to take a look at the latest stories about marijuana from news organizations across America and around the world in our NORML daily audio stash, Hemp Headlines. California headed off the fiscal rails. Los Angeles. The state of California, its deficits ballooning, its lawmakers intransigent, and its governor apparently free of allies or influence, appears headed off the fiscal rails. Since the fall, when lawmakers began trying to attack the gaps in the $143 billion budget that their earlier plan had not addressed, the state has fallen into deeper financial straits, with more bad news coming daily from Sacramento. The state, nearly out of cash, has laid off scores of workers and put hundreds more on unpaid furloughs. It has stopped paying counties and issuing income tax refunds and halted thousands of infrastructure projects. After negotiating nonstop from Saturday afternoon until late Sunday night on a series of budget bills that would have closed a projected $41 billion deficit, state lawmakers failed to get enough votes to close the deal and adjourned. They returned to the Capitol late Monday morning, only to adjourn until the afternoon, though it was far from clear whether they would be able to reach a deal. $41 billion! Wow, that's a lot of money. Can California afford to keep busting people for pot and flying helicopters over the Emerald Triangle to rip up marijuana grows? According to analysis from California NORML at canorml.org, the state could reap $8 to $13 billion from legalized marijuana and hemp. Now, that doesn't completely solve the state's budget woes, but it's a beginning. You'd think it would be something the former pot-smoking governor might contemplate. But there is one person on the mainstream media who has been contemplating this, and that's uncharged doctor-shopping oxycodone addict Rush Limbaugh, with his opinion on California marijuana legalization.
Largest crop in California, Brian? Marijuana is exactly right. No, and listen to the numbers, and I'll tell you why this is important. Because the state of California has got this $42 billion budget deficit, and the Assembly realizes they're getting no tax money from it. They're considering decriminalizing it for that purpose. This is how it all happens. This is how you get rotten socialist economic policies that lead to the cultural rot of a society. Marijuana is California's largest cash crop. It is valued at $14 billion annually. That's nearly twice the value of California's grape and vegetable crops combined. And these are government statistics. A recent report pegged marijuana as 2/3 of the economy of Mendocino County, a ganja hotbed north of San Francisco. That's not surprising. It costs $400 to grow a pound of pot that can sell for $6,000 on the street. But the state doesn't receive any revenue from its cash cow. Instead, it spends billions of dollars enforcing laws pegged at shutting down the industry and inhibiting marijuana's adherence. Of course, there's a reason for that. Marijuana's social costs may include addiction and rehabilitation treatment and lost productivity. Yet these are minute compared with the extensive social costs of alcohol or tobacco. Of course, just legalizing pot wouldn't automatically harvest revenues for the state. An organized system of regulating sales and collecting taxes would need implementing. And it's possible that general drug use could rise, though the debate that pot is a gateway drug to harder substances is inconclusive. Put it all together, and California could potentially wipe some $3 billion off its budget deficit by letting its people puff and pay on the largest crop in the state of California. Whoa! As I say, this is how it happens. Economic disasters, bad economic decisions lead to a cultural rot as all of this devolves.
I'm a huge fan of irony. So you can imagine my delight to hear someone who was loaded up on 30 OxyContin a day lecture me about cultural rot from legalized marijuana. It's an even bigger irony that Rush Limbaugh escaped any charges for illegally doctor shopping for those prescriptions and using his maid to pick up the scripts through a rarely used deferred prosecution. Unlike deferred judgment, where you plead guilty and then if you keep your nose clean for a time, you're not punished, with a deferred prosecution, Rush wasn't even charged, nor did he have to plead guilty to anything, so long as he kept his nose clean for 18 months. It's like the fact that Rush Limbaugh received about 2,000 painkillers prescribed by 4 doctors in 6 months never even happened because he promised to be good. Meanwhile, in California, where economic disasters are leading to the cultural rot that would even consider legalization of a plant infinitely safer than oxycodone, Dr. Molly Fry, Charles Lynch, and Eddie Lepp aren't lucky enough to get the Rush Limbaugh treatment when they're caught helping sick people obtain cannabis legally under state law. They get prosecutions, judgments, and stiff prison sentences. Surprising study conclusion. Using cannabis leads to less injury. From the new study, Alcohol and Cannabis Use as Risk Factors for Injury, a case crossover analysis in a Swiss hospital emergency department. There is sufficient and consistent evidence that alcohol use is a causal risk factor for injury. For cannabis use, however, there is conflicting evidence. A detrimental dose-response effect of cannabis use on psychomotor and other relevant skills has been found in experimental laboratory studies, while a protective effect of cannabis use has also been found in epidemiological studies. So these researchers took a look at 468 randomly selected injured patients from an emergency department of a hospital in Switzerland. They determined whether the patients had used alcohol, cannabis, or nothing at all 6 hours prior to their injury. Not surprisingly, they found people who drank alcohol were more likely to be injured, and in a dose relationship way. That is, the drunker you get, the more likely you'll get injured. But then, an interesting discovery. The most surprising result of our study was the inverse relationship between cannabis use and injury. Possible explanations and underlying mechanisms, such as use in safer environments or more compensatory behavior among cannabis users, were discussed. Meaning that not only were stoned people less likely to become injured than drunk people, but also less likely to be injured than sober people. And that the more stoned you got, the less likely you are to become injured. Some people might take this to mean that it's hard to get injured eating Cheetos on the couch while watching SpongeBob. I think it means stoners' attraction to the safest of all recreational intoxicants naturally selects the people who make safer decisions in other areas of life. Top Mexican cop charged with taking $450,000 bribe from drug cartel. Mexico City. The former head of Mexico's Special Organized Crime Bureau has been charged with selling information to one of the country's most powerful drug cartels, the Attorney General's office said on Sunday. Noe Ramirez, who stepped down as chief of the Ciedo Federal Investigation Unit in July last year, was detained in November for allegedly receiving $450,000 for passing secrets to the Sinaloa cartel, headed by Mexico's top drug fugitive, Joaquin Shorty Guzman. Mexico's police force is riddled with corruption, and the arrest of the country's top drug prosecutor has been the biggest catch so far in a sweeping probe to smoke out cops and government officials working for drug smugglers. 2 other anti-drug agents were jailed in 2008 for taking bribes of up to $500,000 from the Beltran Leyva gang, which recently split from the Northern Pacific Coast Sinaloa cartel. President Felipe Calderón's 2-year crackdown on drug cartels has sparked turf wars between rival gangs that led to the deaths of around 6,000 people last year. The attempts to root out the corruption in Mexico's police and federal officials in the era of $500,000 bribes is somewhat like bailing the water out of the sinking boat instead of working on patching the hole. There will just be another Noe Ramirez willing to take a 6-figure bribe so long as American demand for Latin American drugs is strong. We're destabilizing a country on our border and financing their most violent criminals because our politicians think the chance an American teenager might smoke weed is far more worrisome than 6,000 dead Mexicans and a North American narco state. Ohio juvenile court judge returns to bench after drug charges. Clinton County, Ohio juvenile court magistrate Roger Bowling will soon be back on the bench. Bowling, age 58, who was charged December 9th with 2 misdemeanor charges of possession of marijuana and possession of drug paraphernalia, appeared January 23rd in Hillsborough Municipal Court, where the case was transferred after Clinton County Municipal Judge Chad L. Carey stepped aside. Judge David McKenna of Hillsborough Municipal Court and prosecutor Fred Beery brought the case against Bowling. A spokesperson in the Clinton County Municipal Court said the possession of drug paraphernalia was dismissed with prejudice under a plea agreement. For the possession of marijuana charge, the court ordered a $158 bond forfeiture. A Wilmington resident, Bowling was charged after Wilmington police executed a search warrant at his home for illegal narcotics. Police detectives found marijuana seeds and stems, pipes with residue, rolling papers, and burnt marijuana cigarettes, according to a media release from the Wilmington Police Department. At the time the charges were filed, police said anonymous tips led to a 3-month investigation. During the investigation, detectives developed probable cause, said police, prompting the issuance of the search warrant. After he was charged, Bowling was removed from the bench and initially placed on paid administrative leave, according to Clinton County Juvenile Court Administrator David Hockaday. Clinton County Probate Judge Alan Gano said Bowling was later placed on leave without pay. As juvenile court magistrate, Bowling oversees a number of juvenile cases, most of them traffic offenses, said Hockaday. Bowling also handles a variety of other cases, including juvenile misdemeanor drug cases. Yes, even judges are cannabis consumers. I'll bet the juveniles Judge Bowling sentenced for possessing marijuana seeds and stems, pipes with residue, rolling papers, and burnt marijuana cigarettes didn't get his sweet plea deals, paid leave, and no jail time.
%76% of Americans no longer support arresting and jailing marijuana smokers, and nearly as many support the medical patients having access to medical marijuana. And over 80% of our citizens now believe the war on drugs is an ineffective failure. So the question is, when will the government's misguided war on adult marijuana smokers finally end? When? Simple. When you and your like-minded friends, family, and coworkers get involved with an organization such as the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, also known as NORML. My name is Keith Stropp, and I founded the organization in 1970. Contact us at NORML, toll-free, 888-67-NORML, or by visiting the organization's up-to-date webpage at www.norml.org.
Tuesday is our look at your government at work here at the Audio Stash. While the inevitable re-legalization of cannabis hemp will have to happen at the federal level, the steps leading to that destination take place at the state and municipal levels. We focus in on the initiatives, bills, and amendments regarding cannabis across all 50 states, and what activists like you are doing to enact a positive reform to our cruel and outdated marijuana laws.
Body dies, the eagle flies, the birds they sing, the creatures learn. It's an honest day's work, yeah, 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 yeah. It's an honest day's work.
If you're working hard to make an impact in your city and state, please email us at stash@normal.org and let's share your local efforts with the worldwide cannabis community. Together, we can affect our government at work.
Pollution rises high into the sky. How can we still deny the truth?
We continue to look across the country at the legislatures that are addressing the issue of medical marijuana, and in the Midwest we're getting quite a bit of movement, particularly in the state of Minnesota, where Senate File 97 had just passed with bipartisan support from its committee. And joining us to discuss this from Minnesotans from Compassionate Care is Chris DeLaForest. And Chris, welcome to the Stash.
Hey, hello, happy to be here.
All right. Now, you are a former representative in the state of Minnesota. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm a former Republican member of the Minnesota House. I served for 3 terms from 2002 until just a few months ago. I decided not to run for re-election last November.
Now, as I mentioned, the Senate File 97 just got out of its committee. What was the vote? The vote there is about 8-3, wasn't it?
The vote was 8-3, Russ, and it would have been 10-3, but there were 2 supportive legislators who were absent for other obligations. For example, one had to go back home to his district because a popular school superintendent was killed in a traffic accident.
Oh, no.
So it was 8-3. It would have been 10-3.
Okay. Now, comparing this vote to your background as a former legislator there in Minnesota, does this represent a big change in support for medical marijuana in your state?
Like a number of issues, medical marijuana is one where we're going to have to change a lot of attitudes, and that happens over time. And support has been building over time. People may not know, your listeners, that last year the medical marijuana bill in Minnesota passed off the Senate floor. It made it to the House floor, but it never received a vote because of the crush of last-minute legislation. And so, while predicting outcomes is sometimes problematic, we are confident that this bill will reach the governor's desk this year.
Do you feel any gain in support through the passage of medical marijuana in the state of Michigan in your nearby area?
Absolutely. One of the things I have been doing is speaking with former colleagues about Michigan. There seems to be a popular perception or a misconception out there that medical marijuana is sort of a California thing, and that plays on some stereotypes regarding California's culture and the like. And so to have Michigan, where the ballot question passed with 63% of the vote, it outperformed Obama. Oh, also, by the way, all the counties in Michigan, including those that voted for John McCain, also supported medical marijuana. So I think it's especially helpful to see an upper Midwestern state like Michigan that has a culture similar to Minnesota's pass that question with such an overwhelmingly positive majority. It was a rather decisive victory. So yes, that's quite helpful.
Now, you were hopeful about the bill making it through the Senate and the House and on to the governor's desk. That's Governor Tim Pawlenty still?
That's correct.
And has he indicated any support or whether he'd oppose this bill with a veto?
Well, the governor has been somewhat circumspect about the issue, and I don't think, quite honestly, that he's given it his full attention yet, and that's understandable. Like other states, Minnesota is facing upwards of a $7 billion budget deficit, so that's occupying the majority of his time. So I am cautiously optimistic that the governor will give us an opportunity to address any concerns that he may have. I think that any stated opposition that he has in the past is somewhat overblown. I know that the governor is thoughtful and intelligent, and he'll give us a fair hearing. So, again, the prediction business can be pretty dangerous, but I'm confident that the governor will give us a fair hearing once the bill gets on his radar, so to speak.
Okay. Now, in a press release from Minnesotans from Compassionate Care, we got the notice here of many people testifying in support of this bill, many people whose lives have been changed through the medical use of cannabis. How useful has this testimony been in swaying the lawmakers in Minnesota, and are you still looking for more people who have their stories to tell?
Russ, I think that this witness testimony has been compelling, and that may even be an understatement. Some of the people who have come forward, such as Kathy Rippentrop, whose mother benefited from medical marijuana and dealing with colon cancer, or Joni Whiting, whose daughter benefited from medical marijuana during her struggle with malignant melanoma. These stories are just heart-wrenching. As a matter of fact, they're the kind of stories, quite honestly, I have difficulty sometimes at night going to sleep thinking about these stories. I've seen some of the post-op photos from Miss Whiting's daughter, for example, so there is little doubt in my mind that the stories of these people are not only compelling, they are overwhelmingly so. And, of course, we are always looking for more people to come forward and share their stories and convince Minnesota legislators that, this isn't some kind of subterfuge by lazy stoners to try and get pot legalized. What we are trying to do is to carve out an exception for the sick and dying. And personally, I'm with you on the argument that marijuana prohibition's been a failure, but we have to remember here that what we're trying to do in Minnesota is protect the sick and dying first and foremost.
Oh, absolutely. Anyone who believes that marijuana use that our laws should be changed has to put the sick and the dying in the front of the line. There's no debate about that. Absolutely. And I'm wondering also. In the state of Minnesota, and I know in other medical marijuana states that I've covered, there's often quite a bit of pushback from law enforcement, and they usually have some concerns. What is being done to address the concerns of law enforcement, and what concerns have you found that they've had?
Well, it's interesting. The frustration that we've had here in Minnesota in dealing with law enforcement, and it wouldn't surprise your listeners that they are opposed, is this problem of the moving goalposts, if you will. Last year, law enforcement raised approximately 21 specific concerns with our bill. We amended the bill 19 times, so we addressed 19 of the 21 concerns, and each time we amended the bill, we asked if it would earn their support or at least their neutrality. I mean, we're not asking law enforcement to come out for the bill. We're just asking them to get a bill that they can live with, and they just kept saying no, no, no. And so what we ended up doing is we negotiated against ourselves, quite frankly, 19 times. Now, we are working with law enforcement again this year, and law enforcement's position thus far, unfortunately, has been, well, we're just not going to speak with you. And we will continue to reach out to law enforcement and attempt to craft a bill that meets our objectives first and foremost, but also perhaps can earn their neutrality. But we'll have to see how that all plays out. I think that, quite honestly, a lot of the concerns that law enforcement has have not been borne out. One of the benefits that Minnesota has, Russ, is that we don't have to speculate as to what might or might not happen with medical marijuana. We can look to 13 other states, as you know. I mean, you can do the math. 1 out of 4 Americans lives in a medical marijuana state. We've had medical marijuana in America for well over 10 years, with California being first in 1996. And the arguments about more marijuana on the street or violent crime or the buildings crumbling and anarchy breaking out just haven't come to fruition, quite honestly. States all the way from Hawaii out there in the west running over to Maine in the east, we have seen that medical marijuana can work. And quite honestly, Russ, we know medical marijuana is a health issue. It's not a law enforcement issue. I will concede that there is a law enforcement component to it, but first and foremost, it's a health issue. And quite honestly, I'm a little disappointed that all too often we have law enforcement at the Capitol proposing to tell lawmakers what medical policy should be. Let's listen to doctors. For example, the American College of Physicians that has said medical marijuana has value. And so I haven't seen any doctors in St. Paul saying medical marijuana is a bad idea, only cops. And I don't know about you, Russ, but if I were diagnosed with a brain tumor, I wouldn't call my sheriff, I'd call my doctor.
Absolutely. Now, Chris, also I wanted to get to part of the political aspect of this. We noted how the support for this issue is bipartisan, at least coming out of that committee, and you yourself are a former Republican representative, and sometimes there's a stereotype for people who are in this marijuana law reform movement to think of it as a liberal or progressive issue. How do you, as a former Republican representative, address this with other Republicans, and do you see Republican support for this gaining?
Russ, you're right. It is perceived that way. I would agree with you completely. And one of the reasons why I stayed with this issue after I left the legislature is it's sort of my job to speak Republican, if you will, to other Republicans. And we should note that, like in many other states, this bill does truly enjoy bipartisan support in the Minnesota legislature. There are Republican and Democrat authors on the bill. As a matter of fact, Mark Biskins, who is the lead Republican in the Minnesota House, enjoys a reputation reputation as perhaps the staunchest conservative on social and fiscal issues in the Minnesota House, and that has garnered a lot of attention, and rightfully so. But there is a good sort of conservative argument to be made, if you will, with respect to medical marijuana, and that's, quite honestly, is that we as Republicans believe that the best health care policy is made by patients being empowered to make their own health care decisions in consultation with the doctor of their choice. It is a doctor-patient relationship issue, and quite honestly, the government's got no business coming in and tell doctors and patients that they can't use medical marijuana if the patients and doctors believe otherwise. I mean, that's crazy. Anybody who wants to can look at the Republican Party platform on a national level. They can look at Minnesota's Republican Party platform, and when it comes to health care, we talk about putting patients in charge. Now, of course, your listeners all know it makes no sense at all to tell a doctor that they have the freedom to prescribe OxyContin and morphine and the like and put patients on a chemotherapy and radiation regimen, but they can't recommend marijuana if they believe that would be effective. So it is a Republican issue. It's just a matter of convincing Republicans that it is so. And more than that, we all know Milton Friedman and William F. Buckley, two revered conservative thinkers, were very, very much in favor of medical marijuana and, in fact, decriminalization in general.
Mm-hmm. I think of it as roots conservatism, and following these most recent elections, I think conservatives would be well served to get back to that idea of limited government and self-rule that the medical marijuana issue brings out, as you so eloquently put. As we wrap up, Chris, I want to give you a chance to tell our listeners or ask our listeners for their help if they're in the Minnesota area there. What can they do to help get Senate File 97 passed? Who can they contact? What websites can they go to, etc.?
Yeah, they can go to our website, minnesotacares.org, and what they can do is they get involved in a number of ways, but of course, grassroots activism does work. I'm a former legislator, and I know it. Here in Minnesota, our legislators do read their own email, so if you take a moment to email your state representative or your state senator and let them know where you stand, you can make a big difference. Don't believe otherwise. You really can, and if you go to minnesotacares.org, that website will lead you to contact your representative and your senator if you don't know who that is. So get involved and tell them we need to change this ridiculous law, and at least if we're going to have a war on drugs, let's get the sick and dying off the battlefield, please.
Excellent. Well, former representative from Minnesota, Chris D. LaForest, is also working with Minnesotans for Compassionate Care. The website is minnesotacares.org. And Chris, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Stash.
Hey, Ross, it's awesome. I was glad to be here.
Hello, this is Webb Hubble. Life insurance is now available for responsible marijuana smokers. For years, responsible marijuana smokers have not been able to access affordable life insurance products. NORML uniquely supports cannabis consumers. 2 carriers have already agreed to offer all of their traditional life insurance products at all levels without excluding individuals who smoke marijuana responsibly. Help NORML and help yourself. If you've been declined for life insurance, are paying above market premiums, or simply want to know what now may be available in the way of insurance for marijuana smokers, contact me at info@mclaughlinonline.com or simply call me at 202-293-5566.
The battle to end adult marijuana prohibition can sometimes seem endlessly frustrating and impossible to overcome. One way we bond as a community and draw strength to continue is by rejuvenating our spirit through art and music. The Marijuana Music Awards exist to recognize those sonic artists in all genres of music who feature a ganja-friendly message to motivate and inspire all the cannabis community. Our daily Toker Tunes, brought to you by MarijuanaMusicAwards.com, feature the finest in blues, rock, jazz, hip-hop, rap, reggae, country, bluegrass, and dance music to enhance that 420 feeling and refresh all you stashers for another day on the front lines of the drug war. Enjoy this cut from MarijuanaMusicAwards.com and visit our blog at stash.normal.org to learn how you can vote for your favorites and enter your Toker Tunes in the 2009 Marijuana Music Awards. Variety Tuesday brings us the award-winning group Herbal Nation, who combines serious funk jams with a healthy hit of pro-hemp awareness. Herbal Nation won the 2007 NASCAN NORML Awards Best Head Music. The group's first full-length CD, Herbal Nation, won Album of the Year in both 2006 Global and American Marijuana Music Awards. Check out the link to Steve Bloom's article about the group's win from our blog at stash.normal.org. Founded in 1995 by drummer and producer Stumpy, Herbal Nation is made up of killer players from throughout the Northeast U.S. The Herbal Nation CD features Jeff Watkins, saxophonist for the godfather of soul himself, James Brown, as does today's song, We Love the Herb, which won both 2006 Global and American Marijuana Music Awards Song of the Year. Herbal Nation are strongly represented in the marijuana movement. The group have been featured in High Times magazine and performed at many marijuana events, including High Times Cannabis Cup, 2006 Stony Awards, and 2007 American Marijuana Music Awards events. To grab Herbal Nation's award-winning CD, go to herbnfunk.com. That's herb-n-funk.com, and check out the group at myspace.com/Herbal Nation. This is Herbal Nation with We Love the Herb.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey! We love the herb. We love the herb. Take a little seed, put it in the ground and it'll come back to me. The mother earth, she's fed by the sun. She gives it back tenfold one. Mother earth, she gives us all we need. The food that we eat and the air that we breathe. Back to the roots, back to the earth. We're gonna tell her how to eat. We love the earth. They made the laws and outlawed the herbs. They told us that this planet was our own.
Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML. Have you heard about the new super pot that's supposedly 20 times more potent than your father's Woodstock weed? Don't believe the hype. Marijuana's THC potency has always varied, even in the 60s and 70s. And the drug czar's numbers are full of, well, exaggerations. While no intoxicant is harmless, cannabis is non-toxic and far safer than alcohol. No matter how much you smoke, of whatever potency, you cannot die of a marijuana overdose. Potency is irrelevant anyway. More potent pot just means you smoke less of it, meaning less harmful smoke in your lungs. This is a prime example of harm reduction in action. Besides, the government already allows the prescription of THC pills. Its commercial brand name is Marinol, and it's 100% potent. Meanwhile, the federal government won't allow dying people to use natural marijuana, no matter what the potency? Does this make sense to you? Learn the facts about pot. Visit NORML.org today.
Once again, time for more Government at Work. And last week we told you about the great state of Montana having a hearing on a House Bill 473. This was a awful bill that, let's just go to the state of Montana and get the update with Tom Dobert from Montana Patients and Families United at mtpfu.org. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Russ. Great to be with you.
Now, we had talked to you last, and there was a big hearing coming up on this HB 473. Tell our listeners a little bit about why this was such a bad bill and what happened in the hearing.
Well, this bill, in our opinion, was flatly unconstitutional. It would have denied anyone with a drug felony record, no matter what the specifics and no matter how long ago it might have occurred, from the right to ever be a medical marijuana patient without regard to the patient's medical need and the views of the physician. So, for example, you could have made a mistake when in college, ended up with a felony record, and then at the age of 40 or 50 acquired cancer or multiple sclerosis or any of the other conditions for which we know marijuana is of huge benefit and not been allowed to become a patient. The bill also would have created new vulnerabilities for physicians for the quote-unquote offense of quote, colluding with a patient for the purposes of helping that patient avoid some kind of legal problem. In other words, it would have required that physicians not only be experts on your medical condition and desirable treatment, but also to know accurately all the nuances of a patient's legal situation. And as we pointed out in the hearing, lawyers aren't doctors, and doctors aren't supposed to be lawyers. It was an amazing hearing. There was actually a judge from rural Montana in to support the bill strongly, reporting that a doctor had testified in his court that he had made a medical marijuana recommendation without actually conducting an exam of the patient. And that's why he said this law was needed, this new bill. And after the hearing, I asked the judge what he had done, whether he had reported that physician to the licensing board. And he said it wasn't his job and that he hadn't. And, it's just, to me, illustrating the insanity of folks thinking they need new kinds of laws when they're not even using the existing laws and regulations to make sure that things are being done properly.
Exactly. I mean, we've got all sorts of laws in place to prevent doctors from practicing medicine irresponsibly or recklessly, and I think that would cover that, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Now, this thing about patients not being able to get a card if they had some sort of drug felony, this would cover people who were medical users before Montana had medical marijuana. If you were a medical grower, using it for medical purposes for, say, MS or something, before the law came into effect, that seems patently unfair to me.
Well, absolutely, and you're right. In fact, I would say that every patient I have gotten to know who happens to be on probation is on probation for a marijuana-related offense that predated our law, and clearly had been using marijuana as medicine at the time.
So, how'd the hearing turn out? What's the good news?
Well, the good news, on the hearing, the news is that it was very dicey, and I would say the overall impression given to the House Judiciary Committee was fairly even in support for and opposition to the bill. The good news, however, is that yesterday we killed the bill in committee executive action, and actually what happened was a straight party line vote again.
Yeah.
All the Republicans on the committee supporting the bill and all the Democrats opposing it, and in our current legislature, the House is evenly divided, and that meant a stalemate. So the bill did not get a due pass recommendation yesterday.
Excellent. So that's the House side in Montana. What's going on the Senate side?
Well, on the Senate side, from the medical marijuana standpoint, very good news. Our most ambitious proposal to date since passage of the medical marijuana law here in 2004 has received a strong due pass recommendation from the Senate Health Committee. Senate Bill 326, late this past Friday evening, received a 5-2 vote in favor of passing it. The committee did pass one amendment before recommending the bill, and that was to drop the possession limits we had proposed from 12 ounces to 3 ounces. But this is still a huge jump forward for medical marijuana patients in Montana. The bill has a number of other provisions that would make things much, much easier for patients to operate legally.
Excellent. We're glad to see that come through, and we'd like to see a 12-ounce limit, but anything that gets it bigger than 1 ounce, I guess, is a step in the right direction.
Absolutely, and some of the other provisions in this bill include the fact that it would allow patients to obtain medicine from any registered caregiver, not just the caregiver they have registered to serve them, and it would also allow caregivers to help each other in the same way. So it would no longer be the kind of problem it has been when one person's garden is producing and another person's garden isn't ready yet.
Yeah.
Be a huge relief to patients who right now, run out and then wait sometimes for weeks to be able to get more medicine.
Does the Montana program have anything in the way of cooperatives or dispensaries to help patients out, or is this the only way?
That's the only way. I think I would say that some patients and caregivers have developed contracts between themselves for the purposes of giving themselves a little bit of legal cover in operating this way. But it's a legal gray area under the current law, which is why we're proposing some of these changes.
And do you feel confident about its chances in the Senate?
I'd have to say very mixed right now. The law enforcement community, which opposed the bill vehemently and which led some committee members to believe their opposition would stop if the committee lowered the possession limit to 3 ounces, is continuing its crusade against this bill. The latest news is yesterday they were telling legislators that allowing 6 flowering mature plants would mean that people could have 312 plants over the course of a year. They're alleging that it only takes 1 week to produce flowers in growing marijuana.
Wow, wouldn't that be nice? What kind of strains you got up there in Montana?
I'm trying to get legislators to ask them for documentation of these kinds of ridiculous claims.
Yeah, I would think you could bring in a horticulturist or botanist or, somebody like Chris Conrad from down in California could shoot that down in a second.
Any expert could.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying earlier, doctors aren't police and police aren't doctors. Well, police aren't horticulturists either.
No, they're not, and especially not when everything they've ever thought they learned about marijuana growing, they learned from the ONDCP office.
Yeah.
But we're hoping to illuminate some of these issues a little later this week. Friday, February 20th is our gala Cannabis at the Capitol event. We're going to be installing displays in the rotunda all day. It'll be the first time in Montana history that illegal marijuana plants will be present in the Capitol building.
Wow.
That will include some plants that have begun to bud. we'll be able to show in person the contrast between a plant that hasn't started to bud versus one that's just starting and one that's close to harvest. And we're also going to have a number of major speakers, including a past president of the Montana Medical Association, Tony Ryan from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And at high noon, we're going to be giving away free brownies.
Oh, nice.
They will not be medical brownies.
But still, we can always dream, can't we? This is all day at the Capitol on February 20th, you're saying?
February 20th, and the height of the event will be probably between 11:30 in the morning and close to 1 when the Senate and House start their floor sessions that afternoon at 1 o'clock. We may engineer some floor fights relating to our issues that afternoon if we decide and if we have the support to suggest that that's the best timing for it.
Well, excellent. We've got that event on our activist agenda calendar at stash.normal.org, so you can get the information on when it's happening and a Google map on how to get there. So hope that helps you out there.
Thanks, Russ.
Hey, no problem. And before we go, is any way that the people listening in Big Sky Country can help you guys out?
Well, absolutely. I'd say right now, calls and emails and letters to any Montana state senator urging support of Senate Bill 326 would be helpful.
All right. That's mtpfu.org. Montana Patients and Families United will help get you all the information you need and how to contact your legislators up there in Montana. You can also visit our alerts page at NORML, which you can find through the Activist Alerts map up at stash.normal.org. There should be a clickable link for Montana. It'll help you figure out who your representative is. It'll give you a pre-made letter. All you got to do is click it and send it on its way. And Tom Dobert, thank you so much for joining us again here on the Daily Audio Stash.
Thank you too, Russ.
Thank you for downloading the NORML Daily Audio Stash, the growing truth about cannabis. We are produced by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. Our executive producer is Alan St. Pierre. Our deputy director is Paul Armentano. Our webmaster is Brian Judy. And web production is provided by Red Aphid Interactive Media. As always, you can catch up on the latest information about marijuana at www.norml.org. And you can interact and download from our Audio Stash blog at stash.normal.org. For everyone here at NORML, I'm your host, Radical Russ Belville, hoping all your harvests are bountiful and your encounters with law enforcement are non-existent. We leave you today with a reminder for you stashers in Arkansas that there's going to be a demonstration with Arkansas NORML, and to set your DVRs for Thursday on the Fox News Channel for MPP's Executive Director, Rob Campia, appearing on the O'Reilly Factor. Also, a cannabis quote brought to you by Mr. Spoff from the Fresh Stash. This one from C.S. Lewis, who said once, quote, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It may be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep, whose cupidity may at some point be satiated, but those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." End quote. Good one, Mr. Spoff. Keep delivering them to the Fresh Stash. I'll keep saying them at the end of the show. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.